The door creaked open at 2 a.m., and my heart stopped. In the faint glow of the hallway, my stepson Ethan stood, his broad shoulders hunched, eyes red and raw. I'd never seen him like this, not the confident All-American quarterback who owned every room he walked into. I sat up in bed, the sheets pooling around me, my voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, what's wrong?" My husband, Tom, slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing in the doorway. Ethan's lips trembled, and he shut the door behind him, sealing us in a moment that felt like it could shatter everything. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel," he whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. "I'm not who they think I am." His words hung heavy, a confession teetering on the edge of a cliff. I knew Ethan as Tom's golden boy, straight, steady, the pride of our small Ohio town. Captain of the football team, dating the cheerleader, destined for a life of predictable success. But the boy in front of me was unraveling, and I sensed this was no ordinary late-night talk. We'd never been close. When I married Tom 5 years ago, Ethan was 16, already set in his ways, a kid who called me Daniel instead of Dad and kept his distance. I was the outsider, the gay stepfather who moved into his world, a world of pickup trucks, church barbecues, and unspoken rules. Tom loved me fiercely, but Ethan, he tolerated me, polite but cold, until now. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the edge of the bed. My heart pounded. I'd spent years navigating this town's sideways glances, the whispers about Tom's husband. I learned to keep my head down, to smile through the discomfort. But Ethan's eyes held something I recognized, a fear I'd carried at his age, a secret too heavy for one soul to bear. He sat, his hands clenched into fists. "I've been lying," he said, barely audible. "To Dad, to Sarah, to everyone. I'm not straight." The words spilled out, raw and jagged, like they'd been clawing at his throat for years. I froze, my breath catching. Ethan, the boy who'd once laughed off my rainbow bumper sticker, was coming out to me, here in the dead of night, in a house that felt like it was holding its breath. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him into a hug, but I didn't. "Not yet." "Okay," I said softly. "Tell me everything." He looked at me, his blue eyes searching mine for judgment, for rejection. He found none, and so he began. Ethan's story poured out in fragments, a mosaic of pain and longing. He'd known since he was 14, he said, but buried it deep. Growing up in Willow Creek, where the church steeple cast a long shadow over every decision, he'd learned early that being different wasn't an option. He'd dated Sarah, the head cheerleader, because it was expected. He'd thrown himself into football, into being the perfect son, because it kept the questions at bay. But then he met Caleb. Caleb was a new kid at school last year, a quiet artist with dark hair and a smile that Ethan couldn't shake. They'd started as friends, late-night study sessions, shared laughs over pizza. But somewhere between the lines, it became more. Stolen glances in the locker room, a brush of hands in the hallway. Ethan described the first time Caleb kissed him, behind the bleachers after a game, the world falling silent except for the thud of his own heart. It was electric, terrifying, and the most alive he'd ever felt. But Willow Creek wasn't kind to secrets. Rumors started swirling, small at first, a whisper here, a smirk there. Ethan panicked. He distanced himself from Caleb, threw himself harder into his role as the town's golden boy. He broke Caleb's heart, and his own, to keep the facade intact. "I thought I could fix it," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I could be normal." I listened, my chest aching. I knew that word, normal. I'd spent my 20s chasing it, hiding who I was until I couldn't anymore. I'd found love with Tom, a man who saw me for me, but the scars of those years lingered. Now, here was Ethan, fighting the same battle, and I felt a fierce protectiveness I hadn't known I could feel for him. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my heart, "you don't need to be fixed. You're not broken." He looked at me, tears spilling over, and for the first time, I saw not just Tom's son, but a young man desperate for someone to see him. Really see him. Before I could say more, the bedroom door creaked. Tom stirred, his voice groggy. "Daniel? What's going on?" Ethan froze, his eyes wide with panic. I held his gaze, willing him to stay calm. This was only the beginning, and I knew the road ahead would test us all. The air in the room thickened as Tom sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Ethan, why are you in here?" His voice was laced with confusion, not yet suspicion, but I could feel Ethan's fear radiating beside me. I placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent anchor, and said, "He just needed to talk, Tom. It's okay." Tom frowned, his gaze flickering between us. At 2 a.m, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, his flannel pajamas rumpled. Ethan's breath hitched, and I knew he was seconds from bolting. I squeezed his shoulder gently, urging him to stay. "It's important," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Let's give him a minute." Tom's eyes narrowed, but he nodded, trusting me in a way that still felt like a miracle after 5 years together. He leaned back, waiting. Ethan's hands twisted in his lap, his knuckles white. "Dad," he started, then stopped, his voice swallowed by the weight of what he was about to say. I could see the war in his eyes, years of expectations clashing with the truth he'd just laid bare to me. I nodded at him, a small gesture of encouragement. I'm gay," Ethan said, the words tumbling out like they'd been held back by a dam now broken. Tom's face went blank, like a computer screen frozen mid-crash. The silence stretched, unbearable, until Tom finally spoke. "What are you talking about, Ethan?" His voice was low, not angry yet, but teetering on the edge of disbelief. "You're with Sarah. You're not like that." Ethan flinched, and I felt a surge of anger toward Tom, though I knew he was just grappling with the shock. I'd seen this before, parents blindsided by truths they hadn't dared imagine. But Ethan didn't need judgment right now. He needed a father. "Tom," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "he's telling you who he is. Let's listen." Tom's eyes met mine, and I saw the flicker of fear there, the same fear I'd seen in Ethan. Fear of change, of a world shifting beneath their feet. Ethan took a shaky breath and continued. He told Tom about Caleb, about the guilt that gnawed at him every time he pushed Caleb away, about the suffocating pressure of being Willow Creek's perfect son. His voice grew steadier as he spoke, as if saying it aloud was stitching him back together. I watched Tom's face, searching for a crack in his stoic mask, but he remained unreadable. When Ethan finished, the room felt too small for the weight of his words. Tom stood, pacing to the window, staring out at the dark street. "This is a lot," he said finally, his back to us. "I need time to think." Ethan's shoulders slumped, and I could see the rejection he feared taking shape. I wanted to shake Tom, to make him see the courage it took for Ethan to bare his soul. But I knew Tom, stubborn, traditional, but not cruel. He loved Ethan fiercely, even if he didn't know how to show it right now. "Ethan," I said, turning to him, "you did something brave tonight. Don't forget that." He nodded, but his eyes were distant, lost in the fear of what came next. Tom turned back, his expression softer but still guarded. "We'll talk more tomorrow," he said, his voice strained. "Go get some sleep." Ethan left the room without another word, and I felt the ache of his absence. Tom sat back on the bed, his head in his hands. "Did you know?" he asked, not looking at me. "Not until tonight," I said. "But I know what he's feeling. And he's scared, Tom. He needs us." Tom didn't respond, and I knew this was only the first fracture in a long, messy journey. The next morning, Ethan was gone before breakfast. A note on the kitchen counter read, "At practice. Back later." I stared at it, my coffee growing cold. Tom was already out, probably at the hardware store, avoiding the conversation we both knew was coming. I felt caught between them, the stepfather who wasn't quite family to either, yet desperate to hold them together. I drove to the high school, the autumn air crisp through my open window. The football field was alive with the team's practice, Ethan's figure unmistakable even from distance. He moved with the same confidence he always had, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to the sidelines where Caleb stood, sketching in a notebook. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and I saw the longing Ethan had described, raw and unguarded. I didn't approach him. Instead, I watched, my heart heavy with the weight of his secret now shared. Willow Creek wasn't ready for this, and neither was Ethan, not fully. But something had shifted last night. A door had opened, and there was no closing it now. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan avoided the house, staying late at practice or crashing at friends' places. Tom buried himself in work, his silence louder than any argument. I was left in the middle, trying to bridge a gap that felt like it was widening by the hour. Every night, I lay awake, replaying Ethan's confession, wondering how to help him without pushing too hard. One evening, I found Ethan in the garage, tinkering with his old bike. The air smelled of oil and rust, and he didn't look up as I approached. "You've been scarce," I said, leaning against the workbench. "Got stuff to do," he muttered, tightening a bolt with more force than necessary. His jaw was set, but his eyes betrayed him, haunted, tired. I wanted to ask about Caleb, about how he was holding up, but I knew he'd shut down if I pushed. Instead, I picked up a wrench and handed it to him. "Need a hand?" He glanced at me, surprised, then nodded. We worked in silence, the clink of tools filling the space between us. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a way to say, "I'm here, even if you're not ready to talk." That night, Tom finally broke his silence. We were washing dishes, the kitchen lit by the soft glow of a single bulb. "I don't know how to do this, Daniel," he said, his voice rough. "He's my kid. I thought I knew him." "You do know him," I said, drying a plate. "He's still Ethan. He's just showing you more of who he is." Tom's hands stilled in the soapy water, and I saw the conflict in his eyes, love for his son battling the weight of a town that wouldn't understand. "I don't want him to go through what you did," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. He'd heard my stories, growing up gay in a small town, the bullying, the isolation. I'd survived, but not without scars. The thought of Ethan facing that broke something in me. "Then we protect him," I said. "We show him he's not alone." Tom nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering. He wasn't ready to fully embrace this, not yet. The next day, I drove Ethan to school. The radio played softly, some country song about lost love, and I saw him flinch at the lyrics. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged, staring out the window. "Caleb won't talk to me," he said finally. "I messed it up, Daniel. I pushed him away, and now he thinks I'm ashamed of him." My heart sank. "Have you tried talking to him?" "Really talking?" Ethan shook his head, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I don't know how. What if someone sees us? What if it gets out?" I pulled into the school parking lot, cutting the engine. "Ethan, listen to me. Hiding who you are, it's a slow poison. I did it for years, and it nearly broke me. You don't have to shout it from the rooftops, but you owe it to yourself to be honest with the people who matter." He looked at me, his eyes searching for something, strength. "Maybe you're proof that this could work." "What if Dad never accepts it?" he asked, his voice small. "He will," I said, hoping I sounded more certain than I felt. "He loves you. It's just going to take time." That afternoon, I saw Caleb at the town library, his sketchbook open to a drawing of the football field, Ethan's figure unmistakable in the lines. I hesitated, then approached. "Caleb, right?" I said, keeping my voice light. He looked up, wary. "Yeah, you're Ethan's stepdad." His tone was guarded, but his eyes held the same pain I'd seen in Ethan's. "He's struggling," I said carefully. "He cares about you, more than he knows how to say." Caleb's expression softened, but only for a moment. "He made it pretty clear he doesn't," he said, closing his sketchbook. "I can't keep waiting for him to figure it out." He stood to leave, and I let him go, knowing this wasn't my fight to fix. That night, Ethan came home late, his face pale. "I saw Caleb," he said, slumping onto the couch. He wouldn't even look at me. His voice broke, and I saw the weight of his choices crushing him. I sat beside him, silent, letting him feel the safety of my presence. Sometimes that's all you can offer: space to hurt, space to heal. The weeks that followed were a slow burn of tension. Ethan threw himself into football, his practices stretching into the night, as if he could outrun his truth. Tom started asking questions, careful ones about Ethan's mood, his plans, but he still kept his distance, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I felt like a translator caught between their silences, trying to keep our family from fracturing. One Saturday, I found Ethan at the park, sitting on the same bench I'd imagined in that romantic Twilight scene. No Caleb this time, just Ethan staring at the ground, a crumpled letter in his hand. "What's that?" I asked, sitting beside him. He hesitated, then handed it to me. It was from Caleb, short and sharp, written in careful script. "I'm leaving, Ethan. I can't stay in a place that makes me hide. I hope you find your truth." My chest tightened. Caleb was moving away, to a city where he could be himself without fear. Ethan's eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. "I lost him," he said, his voice hollow. "I was too scared, and now he's gone." I wanted to tell him it wasn't too late, that he could chase after Caleb, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Not here, not now. "You didn't lose yourself," I said instead. "You're still here, and you're figuring it out. That's what matters." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, fragile but real. That night, I convinced Tom to sit down with Ethan. The three of us gathered in the living room, the TV off, the silence heavy. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. "Dad, I need you to know I'm still me. I'm still your son. I love someone I wasn't supposed to." Tom's face softened, and I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd fought for me when his family questioned our marriage. "Ethan," he said, his voice thick, "I don't understand all of this, but I don't want to lose you." It wasn't a full embrace, but it was a step, and Ethan's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. The next day, Ethan made a choice. He went to school and found Caleb before he left for good. I wasn't there, but Ethan told me later, his voice raw with emotion. They met behind the bleachers, the place where it all began. Ethan apologized, not just for pushing Caleb away, but for letting fear win. Caleb listened, his eyes guarded but soft. They didn't fall into each other's arms, but they talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. Caleb left for Chicago the next day, but he gave Ethan his number, a small lifeline across the distance. Ethan came home different, lighter somehow, even with the ache of Caleb's absence. He started opening up, not just to me, but to Tom, sharing small pieces of himself he'd kept locked away. Tom listened, sometimes awkwardly, but he listened. I watched them, father and son, rebuilding something I hadn't realized was so fragile. Willow Creek started to notice. Whispers turned to murmurs, and Ethan's teammates began asking questions. He didn't hide, not anymore. He didn't flaunt it either. He was just himself, unapologetically. Some friends drifted away, but others stayed, and I saw the strength it took for him to keep going. One night, as we sat on the porch, Ethan looked at me and said, "Thank you, Daniel, for seeing me." I smiled, my heart full. "Always," I said, and I meant it. Spring came to Willow Creek, painting the town in soft greens and pinks. Ethan was different now. Not the boy who'd crept into my room that night, but a young man finding his place in a world that wasn't always kind. He and Caleb stayed in touch, texting late into the night, their connection a quiet promise of something more, someday. Tom and I watched him grow, our pride tempered by the knowledge that his journey was far from over. One afternoon, Ethan came home with a flyer for a local pride event, the first of its kind in Willow Creek. "You going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He grinned, a rare, unguarded smile. "Yeah, and I want you and Dad there." Tom hesitated when Ethan showed him the flyer, but he didn't say no. The day of the event, we stood together in the town square. A small crowd gathered under rainbow flags. Ethan walked with a group of kids from school, Some openly queer, others just there to support. I saw Caleb's influence in him, the way he carried himself, unafraid, even as a few onlookers whispered. Tom squeezed my hand, his grip tight. "I'm trying," he said, his voice low. "For him." I nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for now. Ethan took the stage, a microphone in his hand. The crowd hushed as he spoke, his voice clear and strong. "I spent a long time hiding," he said, "but I'm done with that. This is who I am, and I'm not ashamed." The applause was tentative at first, then grew, a wave of sound that felt like a small victory. I saw tears in Tom's eyes, and I knew he was seeing Ethan, not the perfect son, but the real one, brave and whole. After the event, Ethan found us in the crowd. He hugged Tom first, then me, his arms strong and sure. "I'm okay," he whispered, and I believed him. We walked home together, the three of us, under a sky streaked with sunset. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, and neither were we, but we were family, and that was enough. Years later, Ethan would tell me that night in my room was the moment everything changed. Not because it fixed everything, but because it was the first time he felt seen. He and Caleb would find their way back to each other, building a life in a city far from Willow Creek's judgment. Tom and I would visit, laughing over dinner, marveling at the man Ethan had become.